One of the great privileges we have in this world is that of helping to bear the burdens of other people. There's an interesting imagery regarding it in the book of Ezekiel. Ezekiel isn't the easiest book in the Bible to read, but it does have some very graphic imagery. It was a part of a vision that was mystical, yet it was very clear and it was unmistakable. A whirlwind had come out of the north, and also a great cloud that was surrounded by light, and it had fire continually flashing forth from it. From the midst of it, Ezekiel saw the likeness of 4 living creatures. Each had 4 faces, and each had 4 wings, and they sparkled like burnished bronze. And we're told that under the wings on the 4 sides, they had human hands. We think of wings as instruments by which creatures are lifted and made to soar. But the prophet was looking further than that, and he discovered the very interesting fact that under these wings were human hands. Evidently, God made a world just like that, where human hands would be the instruments that would help the wings that were threatening to droop and to falter and to fail. It's a great privilege that is given to us in this our day to help people to gain wing power. Emily Dickinson said, "If I can stop one heart from breaking, I shall not live in vain. If I can ease one life the aching, or cool one pain, or help one fainting robin into his nest again, I shall not live in vain." Certainly, Jesus recognized the significance of this matter of carrying the other person's load as one of the cardinal principles of living. He came to recover the sight of the blind, to heal the brokenhearted, to preach the gospel to the poor. This was his yoke. And before he left us, he said that we should take this yoke upon us. Paul had a similar emphasis when he wrote his letter to the Galatians. He was addressing it to Jewish converts who had recently sympathized in the crucifixion of Christ. Because they had renounced Judaism, they were undergoing a terrible persecution. They were few in number. They needed a helping lift. And so in the 2nd verse of the 6th chapter, he said, "Bear ye one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ." He knew that no one person is sufficient to carry some of the loads that are thrown in his direction. One of the great women of this country was Catherine Laws, the wife of the famous warden of Sing Sing. She was killed in an accident after 17 years in which there wasn't a day passed that she didn't walk among the condemned of society, into their yards, into the prison hospital, the workrooms, the visiting rooms. And faces became brighter as she passed by. She would go to such and such a man and ask him if he was worried about his family. Was there something that she could do about it? Did so-and-so feel that the end of the world had come, simply because he was having to put in a stretch in prison? Did he ever think of looking at it just this way? And so she would go on with her counseling and with her encouragement. She took food not sent it, you understand. She took food and clothing and money to the families that were left devastated by the husband's imprisonment. She saw to it that people from the outside sent letters of encouragement to the criminals. And she gave money to those who were just released from prison, sometimes relatively large sums of money, that they might get a start in life again. Well, we live in a world where that kind of living is pretty important business. We live in a world where, thank God, man finds his richest happiness in helping someone else with his load. Isn't it this principle, probably more than anything other, that makes the world livable? The principle that separates the Florence Nightingales and the Father Damiens from the rest of the pack. Those who found not only happiness in themselves, but a living immortality for others. It's this that separates them from the Scrooges, who cannot understand the spirit of giving and lifting and loving. They really don't understand how much they owe to those who have gone before. Have you sometimes heard a person say, "Why should I be excited about doing much for others? They never helped me. I got what I am on my own"? Poor, foolish, blind creatures. There isn't such a thing as a self-made man. I'm sure you remember George Bernard Shaw's classic comment, when he had listened to a man for some time talking about all he had done for himself. And Shaw said, only as Shaw could, "Isn't it wonderful to see a man believing so in himself in a day when so many men don't believe in any God at all?" The fact is that all of us are the result of a burden, born in varying degrees by our parents, our friends, our environment, our community, and far beyond it. All of these and many more contribute to the making of a man. All along the way, there are those forces that have helped to educate us and to assist us in the bearing of our burdens. I read not long ago where the author was pointing out that Christopher Columbus was not an unusually brilliant man, that he borrowed other people's theories, he gathered information from the sailors. Behind him was a great body of people whose beliefs he went out into the community and he utilized them. We give Shakespeare the place of honor among the poets. Yet he, too, borrowed extensively from others. Great jobs have been done in this world, not by one man, but by the efforts of many whose work found its pinnacle in some individual. And under that individual are the human hands. Life is a story of mutual burden bearing. And God seems to have made man in such a way that he gets his fullest joy out of helping someone else to carry his load. We often wonder how the doctor can go from very early morning until very late at night and then up in the middle of the night again. It's just this thing. The support that comes from helping others. There's something extremely therapeutic about it. One woman went to her minister and she said, "Don't you remember when you first came to this church, what wretched health I had? What a nervous wreck I was." And of course he did remember it because he had worked with her. And she added, "I've had to bear so many burdens in my family that today I'm a relatively well woman." And it was true. Bearing the burdens of others had helped her in her own. The opposite is what makes it so difficult for people in many walks of life to retire. Suddenly there's the feeling of not being needed. Suddenly they're deprived of the privilege of many looking to them for advice and for counsel, and often a helping hand. And the consequences of having to surrender the loads of others are very frequently disastrous. I suppose there is nothing in the wide world that is creating more havoc in the retired person, the first couple of years of it at least, than this feeling of not knowing that there's someone else's burden than his own for which he's responsible. No, let's not complain if we have to help others bear their loads. It's the best medicine in the world. But this isn't all. There's another side to this matter. And we would make a great mistake if we stopped with the second verse of the 6th chapter of Galatians. If we read on to the 5th verse, we find the words, "Every man shall bear his own burden." Now, at first, this seems like a contradiction, but it isn't. This is a supplement. These two stand together. Paul was not saying that he did not expect that the Christian people were going to give him assistance in the loads he had to bear. Paul was making very clear to them that he needed this assistance. But he also was making clear to them that he was going to work as hard as he could in the bearing of his own responsibility. He was going to do his best to solve those problems with the grace and help of God, and it was after that that he would look to them. It's an emphasis that needs to be stressed in these days of our years. We've been living in a time when far too many people have been letting others do their burdens, and they bear their burdens, and they seem to be very happy about it. There has been an increasing tendency to pass the responsibility on to others, to let George do it, and something happens to pride in being and pride in doing as the individual seeks a handout from the community, and the community seeks a handout from the city, and the city seeks its handout from the state, and the state seeks its handout from the federal government. Isn't it a tragic thing that in this great nation, very frequently, a man's chance of being re-elected in a constituency depends on how successful he has been as a beggar in Washington? Oh, I know we have a system whereby we're entitled to a share of the taxes that are paid to the federal government, that our present system is set up on a basis of sending back large chunks to the community. But haven't we gone too far in that direction? And don't we also know that psychologically through it all, something irresponsible and tragic has been happening to our people in this matter of bearing burdens? And the art of finding new and clever means of making someone else pay or someone else do has become a poison in the soul of America. And it's become more and more difficult to get an honest day's work for an honest day's pay. We've been developing a swarm of drones, perfectly happy to let the other bees in the hive do the work. And they're not all the poorer people by any means. Frankly, I don't see a great deal of difference between the soul of a man who accepts handouts from the community when he could get work and the one who inherits riches and wallows in his idleness as he thanks God that he doesn't have to work as other men do. Both of them are oblivious to the sanctity of work, and both of them are parasites. And both of them need to hear those great words that were written by Winston Churchill many years ago, directly after the First World War. They're to be found in his book entitled My Early Life. He was writing especially for the young, but there's enough in it to go around for all of us. He said, "Come on now, all you young men all over the world. You are needed. Needed more than ever now to fill the gap of a generation shorn by war. Don't be such a fool or so cowardly as to feel that there is nothing you can do. I care not how old you are, provided your health is good. You have not an hour to lose. You must take your place in the fighting line. Don't be content with things as they are. The earth is yours and the fullness thereof. Enter upon your inheritance. Accept your responsibility. Raise the glorious flags again. Advance them upon new enemies who constantly gather upon the front of the human army. And they have only to be assaulted to be overthrown. And don't take no ever for an answer." He was saying, in effect, what another said to the youth of his day: "I charge thee that thou lose not the hero in thy soul." Tragic thing when it happens to a younger generation. Tragic when it happens in a nation. When the hero in the soul becomes timid, cowardly, looking for its livelihood to the efforts of others. So every man has the responsibility of bearing his own burden, not only for himself, but for this further point, for the example that it sets for others, and that is of Christian significance. There's a contagion to behavior. Let a man boast of some of the things he has gotten for nothing in this world, and it won't be very long before he has a goodly number of converts who are falling in line behind him and following the beat of his drum. There'll always be those who will revel in getting something for nothing. How often have we heard in discussions on income tax The only excuse for a certain behavior in the filling it out is this: we know they'll never detect it. They won't be looking for this kind of thing. There's a contagion to that. There'll always be those who'll revel in letting others bear their burdens. But the other thing's contagious too. Thank God for that. The other thing is contagious. And it's illustrated by another vision from Ezekiel. You recall that he and his people had been taken captive to Babylon, and it was tasked to bring them to the point where they would continue to believe in the God of their fathers and to believe in their God. But there was nothing but hardship, and those are difficult circumstances under which to preach the goodness of God. And the Babylonians mocked their faith, and they scoffed their God. And Ezekiel at times, just to get away from it all and just to get a little strength, would go down by the river, you remember. And there he would think about his nation. He would think about the people who are entrusted to his care. He would think of the faith of Moses, and he would think of the faith of Abraham and of Isaac. And then he would go back, and he would preach to his people again. And one day he saw a great luminous cloud sweeping from the north, within which were 4 winged creatures. Beside each was a wheel, and on the great arch, transparent as crystal, there was a throne. And on that throne he thought he saw the Lord seated. And the prophet wrote, "When I saw it, I fell on my face. And I heard a voice of one that spoke, and he said unto me, Son of man, stand upon thy feet, and I will speak to thee." I believe that there are times when God looks not so much for humility in a person as he does for the hero in the soul. When he looks not so much for people on their knees as those that are standing on their feet, looking the part of those who by the grace of God are going to be equal to the burden that is there. Son of man, stand upon thy feet, and I will speak to thee. Something contagious about that, too. The person who carries his burden with his head up and his shoulders back, disdaining the whining and the whimpering that's always looking for the pity of others. Yes, there's something contagious about that, too. Something contagious about walking along the street and seeing a man that you know has come through some tremendous obstacle. And yet he has the look of courage. And he has the bearing of a man. And you know that here's a man who, by the grace of God, has stood upon his feet. And he hasn't looked to others until he has done all he possibly could by himself. Be strong. We're not here to play, to dream, to drift. We have hard work to do and loads to lift. Shun not the struggle, face it, 'tis God's gift. Bear ye one another's burden. But also every man shall bear his own burden. Every man, so much as possible, shall carry his own weight. and someday present his record in boast before God. And I have a feeling that the record that we have to show in burden bearing of one kind or the other may be the most significant credential that we'll have to give. I read one time of a girl of 16 who lay dying in a London hospital. She had been the oldest child in a large, poor family, and she had literally worked herself to death. Her face was white, her hands were rough. A visitor went to see her, knowing that the end was not far off. Asked her if she had ever been confirmed. No. Have you ever been baptized? No. Did you ever go to a church school? No. And then the visitor said, what are you going to do when you have to tell God all this? And the girl, who had not only borne her own burden, but those of others, laid her white, work-stained hands on the coverlet, and she made a comment that was sublime. Very quietly she whispered, I guess I'll just have to show God my hand. In the name of the Father and the Son and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
We've presented a recording of this morning's worship service from the Shadyside Presbyterian Church, Amberson Avenue and Westminster Place in Pittsburgh. Ministers of the church, the Reverend Dr. Howard C. Scharfe, Reverend Dr. James R. Spear, the Reverend J. Wayne Hanratty. Organist and choir director Russell G. Wickman. Today's sermon by Dr. Scharfe was entitled On Bearing Burdens.